I just encourage you, if not now, at some point, look around and just take in the view here at College Mennonite. By the way, welcome to my world. I'm trying to break in here and get used to something new, and now this is a start for you all too, in some ways. Allow me to read Psalm 44. What a great setup for our engaging with Psalm 44. I'm going to read just parts of it, and the screen's going to kind of progress through the book of Psalms, chapter 44, but let me just read part of it so we don't need to read all 26 verses. We have heard it, God. Our ancestors told us about it, about the deeds you did in their days. You, by your own hand, removed all the nations, but you planted our ancestors. No, not by their own sword did they take possession of the land. Their own arms didn't save them. No, it was your strong hand, your arm, and the light of your face, because you were pleased with them. We've pushed our foes away by your help. I won't trust in my bow. My sword won't save me. So, we glory in God at all times and give thanks to your name forever. But now you've rejected us and humiliated us. You no longer accompany our armies. You make us retreat from the enemy. Our adversaries plunder us. You've handed us over like sheep for butchering. You've scattered us among the nations. All day long, my disgrace confronts me, and shame covers my face because of the voices of those who make fun of me and badmouth me, because of the enemy who is out for revenge. All of this has come upon us, but we haven't forgotten you or broken our covenant. Our hearts have turned away. Our hearts have not turned away. Neither have our steps strayed from your way. If we had forgotten the name of our God or spread out our hands to some strange deity, wouldn't God have discovered it? After all, God knows every secret of the heart. No, God, it's because of you that we are getting killed every day. It's because of you that we are considered sheep ready for slaughter. Wake up. Why are you sleeping, Lord? Get up. Don't reject us forever. Why are you hiding your face, forgetting our suffering and our oppression? Stand up. Help us. Save us for the sake of your faithful love. How do we hear that? I believe this psalm provides a good backdrop for us as we are on this series, We Are From journey, this journey that we are trying to reflect on who we are. We are from a cry for help. If you take this chapter, it kind of has 4 different parts to it. And I note it because I think it sets us up well for asking this question, why? Why? First of all, God's goodness is named. It's not at the end of the chapter, it's the beginning of the chapter. And then there's the lament of our defeat and shame. And then there's that third part, what maybe could be called a protest, because we've not done anything wrong. A lot of times in the Psalms, there's a confession of saying we broke the covenant or we messed up. But here, the writer is saying for the people, we haven't messed up, God, that we know of. We've kept the covenant. And then that last part, that plea, that asking, why? Why, God? Where are you at? Why? And I have to admit, this framework throws me off a bit. Because typically, in the Psalms, it's kind of a cry for help, generally speaking. There's a cry for help. There's a recognition maybe that we've messed up. And that, God, we recognize you are good. Recognize that you are God and we are not. And that's kind of the way we've framed our prayers oftentimes. That we recognize our own shortcomings, we recognize our need for God, but that in the end, God is good. And we rest in that. So what happens when we have a chapter here that all of a sudden leaves us hanging at the end? It's not coming around and saying, but God, you're good. But God, we recognize who you are in the midst of everything that we're facing. It leaves us hanging with the whys and where are you, God? And then it just stops. What's it like to be left hanging? What's it like for people of faith to carry their weeping and their gnashing of teeth and their groans without a surety of knowing where we're going to go? Like I said, this throws me off a bit. This discomfort, this unknowingness leaves us hanging. Why? Why? My wife Mary and I became well acquainted with Mary Jane Detweiler when we lived in eastern Pennsylvania. Many of you might know her. Her and her husband were in leadership in the church, faithful members of the church, both in church as well as academic circles. And about the last 20 years of her life, she passed away when she was 79 years old. But the last 20 years of her life, she had this condition where, a nerve condition where even if you touched her, she got pain. So she had to be careful even what clothes she wore. And yet there was Mary Jane with this smile, this countenance about her that lived through this pain, this wondering why. And I'm sure there were many days where she would wake up, or she would wake up in the middle of the night and just say, God, why? Take this infirmity away from me. Richard passed away about 17 or 18 years before she did. And so she lived not just with her and her husband together, but she lived in loneliness in a lot of ways. And so when I think of this chapter and this being left hanging with the whys, the questions that we might ask God, the screams and the cries, Mary and I think of Mary Jane a lot. Her life formed, her and Mary were very close. And her spirit helped to shape Mary's faith in a lot of ways. What do we do when a psalm leaves us hanging? Where does our hope come from? We're left with God characterized in ways that troubles us. Doesn't God always come to the rescue? Can we usually find relief in some way? When there are no answers or when God is quiet, what does that do to our even willingness to cry out? Our own James Waltner, who wrote the Psalms portion of the Believer's Bible commentary, speaks of something that I think is informative for me at least, and that there's a price to be paid when we're loyal to something loyal to a cause, loyal to a person, a God who we give our whole lives to. And so we as people of faith, when we are loyal to God, when we are loyal, all of a sudden when we face difficulty, it's not always going to be easy answers. Because our loyalty is first and foremost to God, not to our own well-being. And so when you look at the Old Testament, these people who are crying out in Psalm 44, they were elect. They were set apart from the rest of the world. And so they were set up to face failure, to face difficulty. So it makes sense when they're suffering and they're asking, God, where are you? Sometimes God spoke back, responded. Sometimes God seemed silent. The same way with the persecuted church or with the people of faith today. Is it any wonder that we face contention, that we face challenges? Faith is held more dear than life itself. Suffering doesn't always make sense, does it? So yeah, suffering is understandable, but what about silence? It's one thing to suffer and to have an idea where it comes from, but what about when we yell, when we scream, when we cry out to God and there's silence? As they say today, crickets, right? How do we reconcile unanswered prayer when we're praying in faith, when it feels like there's not a voice response? I'm hurting, and even though I'm praying, I'm still hurting. Or a man lives in the area here whose daughter was killed in a car accident, and just before the accident, talked on the phone and prayed together, asking for God's protection on the road. And within hours, she passed away from not being protected on the road. How does that do with your prayers? With our askings. And to this day, he still lives with the whys. Still lives with the whys. What happens to our theology of God when it pushes up against something that doesn't quite measure in what we believe? How does our belief in God affect it? How's our prayer life affected when we are faced with these questions? You've heard the phrase, oh, if something good happens, you must have been living right. Right? How often do we hear that? How long? What are some different ways that we ask questions? Why? What next? Help. There's some people I've heard responses from as far as what to do with these quandaries, these faith quandaries. What do we expect from God when we cry out? Well, if I keep asking, kind of like that judge, that parable of the judge who finally gave in because someone was just persistent, if I just keep asking, then maybe God will relent. And then sometimes there's that narrative where people say, well, anything I ask in God's name is biblical. When I feel hopeless, I just keep asking because it keeps me from descending into darkness. What keeps me going, someone said, is solidarity. Doing it in unison with other people, asking together. Some even say, why even cry out? It's no use. Then another person says, what's important to me is when I ask others to pray with me and for me. Crying out, not just alone, but with others. And so often we hear in these Psalms of lament, as in, although chapter 44 is what they call a national lament, or it's a joint lament. But so often we hear in these laments the individual asking, feeling like they have no one else. Joining with other people. Sometimes when we are with other people who are crying, when someone asks us to join with them, it's hard to be with them when you're with people who are in anguish. It's hard to sit with someone who is so angry that, kind of like in Psalm 137, they're so angry they want retribution. They want to kill their babies. They're so angry with people that they just are beside themselves. How easy is it for us to be with people who are at such difficult spaces. I had this notion of just walking off and leaving you all hanging, kind of like this chapter does. And understandably, I think what we've done already in this service is realize that in this first gathering together like this, we come with a lot more questions than answers. And I think that's the same way in our prayer life. So often when we come to God, we come with more questions than we have answers. And I think that's an important understanding to have. What does it mean to have joy? What does it mean to live with joy? To live with is it upbeat spirit? What does it mean to live with joy in the midst of pain? That embodied the life that Mary Jane lived. She chose joy. She chose a life that represented the peace she had within in her heart, no matter what the pain was that she had physically. Peace and contentment, even in the midst of difficulties. I like that definition of joy. And I think that gives us a good stone to step on when we are faced with difficult prayers, difficult shouting out. Living with joy, James 1. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And perseverance finishes its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Pure joy. Gratefulness, living one day at a time, serving others. Another phrase that comes out of our hymnal in a couple different ways, and that Jesus spoke to his disciples, Jesus spoke to his followers, and so many times said, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, I'm with you. Be not dismayed, I am your God. I will strengthen you, I'll help you, I'll hold you with my right hand. So how do you finish? How do you come away from Psalm 44? I think those are some pieces that carry us well. Not that we have answers, but that we do this not alone, but as a body of believers. And so as we live into the questions that are ahead for us as a congregation, we don't do it expecting to find all the answers, but we do so because we know we can do it together. It's hard when it's by ourselves. Don't be afraid. So this writing, you might say, from Psalm 44 might be seen as a gift. Our response song today, I'd invite the music team to come forward, but it talks about immersing ourselves in the river of the Spirit. Immersing ourselves in the Spirit. We need to be refreshed from the dry heat. We need to develop a thirst for Jesus, a thirst for the Spirit at work among us. And I pray that as we come away from a psalm like this where we are shouting out to God, that Spirit will uphold us and help us to flow toward Jesus. Amen.